Montana Territory, January 1881. The ice cracked under her boots, but Olivia Trenton did not stop. She shifted her grip on the bundle wrapped tight to her chest, her infant brother's cheek pressed against her coat. His breath fogged against her collarbone, warm and damp, while the wind cut through the tears frozen on her face. The river was nearly across now, only 10 more steps, maybe 12. Behind her, the woods were still, too still. The kind of still that meant someone was out there watching. Maybe tracking her, maybe not, but Olivia had learned not to wait and see. She pressed forward, the water beneath the ice roared like a warning. Her skirt was soaked to the knees, her legs numb, but she made it across. The snow on the far bank reached past her calves, and the wind bit harder up here, slicing down the rise into the trees. She stumbled forward, one hand out to brace against tree trunks, the other keeping her brother close. Peter whimpered. She stopped, sinking to her knees behind a fallen pine, and opened her coat a little to let him breathe easier. His lips were pink, not blue. That was good. He was still warm, still alive. Her hands trembled as she tucked the blanket tighter around him. "I know, baby, I know. I got you." She had no plan past the river, just away from the man who had killed their mother, away from the house that reeked of smoke and blood. She had grabbed the baby and run, no horse, no food, just instinct and fury and the memory of a map she had seen once at the general store. She was not sure how long she moved through the forest, hours, maybe. Her feet bled. Her lips cracked, but she kept going. Then, as the sun fell behind the trees, she saw smoke curling from a chimney not far up a ridge. She hesitated. Her fingers brushed the small knife in her boot. It was all she had, but she had Peter. She could not turn back. The cabin stood alone, tucked between 2 ridges with a frozen creek curling behind it. The windows glowed amber. A horse stood tied under the lean-to, steam rising from its flanks. Olivia stepped forward, her breath hitching, then knocked twice, firm and fast. The door opened halfway. The man on the other side was tall, broad-shouldered beneath a worn coat. His dark blonde hair fell to his collar, and his eyes, gray like a storm, shifted from her face to the bundle in her arms. She tried to speak, but no words came. He stepped back without a word, holding the door open. She blinked, dazed, and stepped inside. The warmth hit her like a fist. Firelight spilled across thick rugs and a heavy table. A pot simmered on the stove. She smelled meat. Her mouth watered. The man shut the door behind her. "Sit," he said, nodding to the chair near the fire. Olivia hesitated. "I am not going to hurt you," he added, voice calm. "You look half dead. Let him get warm." She moved to the chair and sank into it, pulling Peter close to the fire. He stirred, eyelids fluttering. The man crouched in front of them, not close, but close enough to see Peter's face. "How old?" 3 months, she rasped. He nodded once. "He is holding on." She looked up. "I thank you." I did not know where else to go. He stood and grabbed a blanket from the trunk, then handed it to her. "Wrap your legs, you are soaked." She obeyed, biting back a sob as sensation returned in sharp stabs. He went to the stove, ladled some stew into a tin bowl, and set it on the table beside her. Then he poured water into a cup and placed it beside the bowl. "Eat slow." She blinked at him. "Why are you helping me?" He leaned against the doorframe across the room, arms crossed. "Because you needed help." She looked at the food, then back at him. "What is your name?" "Quinn Zale." She swallowed hard. "Olivia Trenton. This is Peter, my brother." He nodded once more, gaze steady. "You can stay tonight. We will talk more in the morning." She nodded, eyes stinging. "Thank you." Quinn turned and walked into the next room, giving her space. That night, for the first time in days, Olivia slept. Peter curled safe against her, belly warm with milk Quinn had found in the cupboard. Quinn had given her his bed, taken the floor near the fire, and said nothing more. In the morning, she woke to the scent of coffee and the sound of steady hammering outside. She stepped to the window. Quinn was splitting wood, sleeves rolled up, axe swinging in clean arcs. The snow around him was trampled, steam rising from his breath. Peter stirred. She picked him up, held him close. Quinn came in a few minutes later, stamping snow from his boots. "Morning, morning," she said softly. He glanced at her, then the baby. "Fire's hot, coffee's on," she nodded, stepping to the stove. "I do not know how to thank you." "You do not have to." "But I do want to know what happened." She hesitated, then told him. Not everything, just enough. Her stepfather, the threats, her mother's murder, the escape across the river. Quinn listened without interrupting. When she finished, her voice cracked. I have nowhere else to go. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. You do now, her breath caught. What? I have space, I live quiet. You and the boy are welcome. She stared at him. Why, you do not know me, he shrugged. You crossed an icy river in the dead of winter with a baby in your arms. That tells me all I need to know. She blinked fast, heart thudding. Quinn. He turned away, busying himself with the fire. She watched the way his shoulders moved, the quiet steadiness in everything he did. Peter cooed in her arms, cheeks pink now. Olivia kissed his forehead. Later, Quinn helped her wash Peter in a tin basin, careful with the cloth, silent but gentle. Olivia sat beside him, watching the way his hands moved. You been alone long? She asked. He nodded. Years. Why? He glanced at her. War changes people. I came out here to unchange. She looked at him, then down at Peter. He saved me, she whispered. I was ready to give up, but he cried, so I ran. Quinn looked at her, something flickering in his eyes. Then he is the strongest one here. She smiled, soft and tired. Maybe. Snow fell again that night, soft and slow. When she woke in the morning, Quinn was already up, rocking Peter by the fire. He looked over at her, something warmer in his eyes now. He likes the flames. She stepped closer. So do I. He handed Peter back, fingers brushing hers. You are safe here. She looked up at him, startled by how much she believed it. For the first time in her life, she felt it safe, wanted, and something deep inside her shifted, like ice cracking under the first warmth of spring. By the fifth morning, Olivia no longer startled when she heard Quinn moving about in the pre-dawn dark. The rhythm of his steps across the floor, the muted creak of the rocking chair as he soothed Peter before the sun rose, it had all become part of the quiet order of the cabin. She still hadn't asked him why he did these things without being asked. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. Sometimes, kindness felt too sharp to look at directly. She stood at the wash basin, sleeves rolled to her elbows, scrubbing Peter's small cloths with lye soap. Her hands had gone raw in places, but she didn't mind. Work kept her steady, and when Peter gurgled from his pallet near the hearth, she smiled before she could stop herself. Quinn came in from the lean-to, shaking snow from his shoulders and setting down a pail of water. The trail up the ridges packed hard. I'll take the mule down to the post in 2 days, see if anything's come in. She wrung out a cloth and hung it near the stove. Is it far? Half a day down, half back. I won't stay long, she glanced over. Do you get much news there? Enough. Letters sometimes, supplies. He paused, then added, there's a woman runs the place, widow, keeps things orderly. Olivia nodded. You'd trust her. Don't have to trust her, just pay her for her trouble. She turned back to the basin. I'll write something if I can find paper. My aunt's in St. Paul, she might take us. Quinn leaned against the door frame. If that's what you want, I'll get it there. She didn't answer right away. The idea of going east again felt strange, like trying to slide into a dress that didn't fit anymore. He didn't push her. He never did. Later, while Peter napped, she stepped outside to shake out the bedding. The snow was clean and deep, muffling sound. The sky stretched pale and high above the pines. She hadn't stood in open air since crossing the river. It felt like breathing for the first time in weeks. Quinn was chopping logs behind the cabin, his coat shed, shirt clinging to his back. She watched the easy way he moved, the surety in each motion. There was no waste in him, no noise, just purpose. He caught her looking and set the axe aside. You need something? No, she said, brushing snow from her skirt. Just, the air's good, he nodded, wiping his brow with the crook of his arm. You can walk with me tomorrow if you like, down to the creek bend, not far. I would, she said, surprised at how much she meant it. That night, after Peter was down, she sat near the stove, mending a tear in her only good skirt. Quinn was at the table, carving something from a block of pine. She hadn't asked what, he hadn't said. Did you have family? She asked, eyes on her stitching. He didn't look up. Once, she let the silence stretch. My brother died outside Franklin, he said finally. Tennessee, spring of '64, we were both in blue. He went first, cannon fire. Olivia set her sewing aside. I came out here after, bought land no one wanted. Built this place by hand. She stood, crossed to the table. I'm sorry, he looked up at her, something bare in his expression. I never told anyone that before. She reached out, resting her fingers lightly on the table's edge. I won't carry it away from here, he nodded once. That's enough. Before she could speak again, Peter cried out. She turned, already moving, and gathered him from his pallet. He fussed against her shoulder but settled quickly. He wakes less now, Quinn said, voice low. He knows he's safe. She looked over her shoulder at him. I do too, Quinn stood, brushing wood shavings from his lap. I'll take first watch tonight in case the storm rolls in. I can sit up a while, she offered. You've done enough. She didn't argue. Instead, she watched him step to the door, rifle in hand, and settle into the chair by the window. Later, long after the fire had burned low, Olivia lay awake, Peter curled beside her. Quinn's silhouette was still visible against the window pane, motionless, steady. She closed her eyes, the weight in her chest lighter than it had been in weeks. In the morning, she would walk with him. And maybe, just maybe, she would not write that letter to St. Paul. The snow had stopped by dawn, leaving a clean crust over the world outside. Olivia stepped through the cabin door with Peter tucked snug to her chest, his little hat pulled low over his ears. She carried him with a practiced steadiness now no longer frantic, just sure. The cold air met her cheeks like cloth wrung in ice water, but she welcomed it. Quinn stood beside the mule, cinching the last strap of a canvas pack to its side. He glanced up at her, eyes flicking to Peter. He'll need something dry on his hands if you're walking with me. She pulled a pair of wool socks from her coat pocket and slipped them over Peter's fists. Wasn't sure if I'd need these. Glad I brought him. Quinn gave a small nod and turned to lead the mule toward the slope west of the cabin. Olivia followed, careful with her footing, boots sinking into the softened crust. They moved without hurry, the only sound their steps and the creak of leather under the mule's saddle bags. After a while, Olivia asked, You ever think about leaving here? No, he said. Not in a long time. Why not? He didn't answer right away, then tried the world once. Didn't suit me, she shifted Peter higher. But you made a life out here. I made a place to breathe. They moved down a shallow incline where the pines opened into a clearing. A deer trail cut through the drifts, and Quinn followed it with easy confidence. I used to think cities were safer, Olivia said. That the noise meant someone would come if you screamed. He looked over his shoulder. Did they? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence filled the space between them. They reached the creek bend where the water ran narrow and fast, never fully frozen. Quinn tied the mule to a low branch and crouched to check a line he'd set beneath the bank. Olivia stood back, rocking gently to keep Peter asleep. When he rose again, he held 2 speckled trout, both thick across the belly. He dropped them into a canvas satchel hooked over the saddle. You fish often? She asked. Often enough. She stepped closer to the bank, watching the water curl around ice-slick stones. My ma used to say rivers remember, that they carry pieces of everything ever dropped into them. Your ma was right. Olivia looked at him. Sometimes I think about what I left behind in that river. Quinn didn't look away. It's not following you here. She watched his face, the quiet way he meant every word. You always speak like that. Like what? Like there's no need to say more than what's true. He gave the faintest shrug. Words never made much difference in the worst moments I've seen. She looked down at Peter, whose fingers were twitching beneath the wool. I think I'm still figuring out which ones matter. You're doing fine. They walked back slower, the sun slipping higher over the ridge. Quinn let her set the pace. Partway up the trail, Olivia stopped and turned toward him. I didn't write that letter, she said. I figured. You're not going to ask why. It's your choice, not mine. She waited a beat. I didn't want to leave the only place that didn't feel like something I had to survive. Quinn met her gaze. You don't owe me anything? I know, she said. That's why it matters. The wind shifted, brushing through the trees with a sound like breath. Olivia looked toward the cabin, just visible now through the thinning timber. Does it ever feel less quiet? She asked. Sometimes, if you wait long enough. I'm not afraid of quiet, she said, just of filling it with the wrong things. Quinn's voice was steady. Then don't. When they reached the cabin, she unwrapped Peter and laid him in the basket Quinn had lined with wool scraps days earlier. She watched him sleep a moment before straightening. Quinn stood at the hearth, setting the trout beside the stove. You want the knife, or should I clean them? I'll do it, she said, already reaching for the apron. He watched her move precise, calm, unhurried, and then turned back to the fire. That evening they ate in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Afterward, Quinn stepped outside and she followed without asking. The stars were sharp above the trees, scattered like flint sparks. I never thanked you, she said. You did, he replied. No, not for keeping quiet when I needed it. For not asking things before I was ready. Quinn looked toward the trees, then back at her. You ever think about staying? I think about Peter growing up somewhere he doesn't have to run. He nodded once. And I think about what it would mean to not be alone at the end of the day. This time he didn't look away. You wouldn't be. She stepped closer, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. Then maybe I'll stay. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. He just said, all right. And beside them, through the dark and the snow, the trees stood still. The spring thaw came late. Snow held on in the shaded gullies, clinging stubbornly to the roots of pines and the northern slopes of the ridge. But the creek had risen, and with it came the sound of water running hard over stone, constant now, a pulse that never quieted. Olivia stood behind the cabin, sleeves rolled to her elbows, her arms deep in the earth. She worked slowly, pulling rocks from the soil beside the low fence Quinn had built the week before. Not a word had been spoken about her staying since that night beneath the stars, but she hadn't left, and he hadn't asked her to. Quinn came down from the ridge with an armful of dry pine boughs. His boots tracked mud now instead of snow, and his face was darkened by sun instead of wind. He paused when he saw her kneeling beside the fence, then dropped the boughs in the lean-to and came over. You're starting early, he said. I can't plant anything if the ground's still full of stone, Olivia replied, brushing dirt from her brow with the back of her hand. And it's not going to clear itself. He crouched beside her and picked up one of the larger rocks she'd set aside. You're aiming to grow, I thought I would, she said, sitting back on her heels. I saw a bundle of seed near the back wall, looked like beans, maybe squash. Likely is, I bought it last year, didn't get around to turning the ground. You mind if I use it? He shook his head. No. Just surprised you're planning that far ahead. She looked at him, then down at the dirt. I don't make plans often, but I think I want to now. Quinn didn't answer, just reached for another stone and set it aside. They worked in silence for a while, the sun rising higher behind them. Peter cooed from the cradle Quinn had carved from cottonwood, safely shaded under the porch rail. You ever grow anything? Olivia asked eventually. He nodded. Corn once, back in Missouri, before the war. Did it take? Not well. Soil was thin and I didn't know what I was doing. She smiled. Well, between the two of us, we might get something green by summer. He glanced at her then, and something eased in his expression, not soft but open. That afternoon, Olivia took Peter down to the bend where the creek widened. The water was high now, and the banks were soft with new grass pushing up through the thaw. She laid the baby on a thick wool blanket and sat beside him, watching the sky move between the trees. A gray jay landed nearby, cocking its head in sharp, jerky movements. Peter followed it with wide eyes, fists curled tightly. You see that? Olivia whispered. That's yours to look at now, all of it. The jay flew off and she lay back on the blanket, arms tucked beneath her head. She hadn't let herself think about the river crossing in weeks, but the memory came now cold, sharp, and brief. She didn't flinch from it. It had happened. She had survived it. When the sun dropped low, she carried Peter home. Quinn was inside, mending a cracked boot sole. He looked up as she stepped through the door. He sleep any? Not much, she said. But he liked the wind, Quinn nodded. He's tougher than he looks. He gets it honest. Quinn set the boot aside. I was thinking about digging a second well further from the creek. Might be cleaner. She took off her shawl and hung it near the door. You want help, eventually. I'll be here, she said. He stood, wiping his hands on a cloth. I know. That night, after Peter had gone down, Olivia sat on the porch rail, listening to frogs begin their low song near the creek. The air smelled of thawed earth and pine sap. Quinn joined her, hands in his pockets. He didn't speak at first. Then, you ever think you'd have a place of your own? I thought I might marry into one. Never thought I'd choose it for myself. You have, she nodded, and I'll make it what I can. He turned his head toward her. You could make a lot out of it. "I've got time," she said. They sat together until the moon cleared the trees, silvering the grass and the tops of the fence posts. The baby stirred once, then settled. Quinn tilted his head. "You think he'll remember any of this?" "No," she said, "but he'll feel it. I want him to grow up knowing what steady feels like. You'll give him that." She looked at him then, not away, and said, "I want it for myself too." He stepped a little closer. "You've got it, as long as you want it." Her breath caught, not from surprise, but from how simple it was. "How complete." "I do," she said. Quinn reached for her hand, calloused fingers closing gently around hers. He didn't need to say anything more, neither did she. The wind moved through the trees like a whisper, and the cabin behind them stood warm and still, built by one man's hands, now shared by two. Inside, Peter slept, the cradle rocking faintly with the breeze. The days lengthened. Rains came soft at first, then steady, pulling green from the hillsides and loosening the last of the frost from the ground. The beans Olivia had planted pushed up in tight rows, pale shoots unfolding like careful fingers. She checked them each morning, kneeling in the damp soil with Peter on her hip, his eyes following the flicker of birds overhead. Quinn had moved the cradle near the window in the main room so Peter could watch the light shift through the trees. Olivia caught him once, standing quiet with a hand on the carved edge, eyes distant. She didn't ask what he was thinking. She only stepped beside him and rested her palm over his, and he let it stay there. One afternoon, she found a rough-hewn wooden box on the table, lid open, with a folded quilt inside. The thread was newer than the fabric, stitched with care, but not by her hand. She ran her fingers over the seams and looked up as Quinn came in, carrying a length of cedar. "I found the pieces in the loft," he said. "Thought he ought to have something for when it turns cold again." She lifted the quilt. "These were shirting scraps." "My mother's," he said. "She sewed through winters when we were boys, made us each one. I never used mine much." Thought it might be better in his hands. Olivia ran her hand along the edge, the needlework tight and plain. "You kept it all this time?" "I didn't know why I was holding on to it. Now I do." That evening, after dinner, Olivia folded the quilt and laid it in the cradle beside Peter. He gurgled and kicked his legs, the hem catching on his booty. She looked up at Quinn, who stood near the hearth, the light catching the lines at the corners of his mouth. "You know," she said, "I never asked what you did before the war." He stepped closer, leaning against the table. "Carpenter's apprentice. My father taught me wood first, then sent me to work under a man in Fayette. I left when I was 17. Did you like it?" "I did. I still do." He nodded toward the cradle. "It's honest work. Doesn't answer to anyone but time." Olivia looked around the cabin, at the beams overhead and the shelves he'd carved by hand. "You built this place for yourself." He met her gaze. "I didn't know it would be for you too." She stood slowly, crossing to where he waited. "Neither did I." He reached for her hand, rough fingers curling over hers. "But you're here," she nodded. "And I'm staying." The weeks passed, and the last of the snow vanished from the shaded gullies. Peter learned to reach for things: her hair, the edge of the quilt, Quinn's fingers. He laughed now, a soft, startled sound that made Olivia still every time just to listen. One morning, Quinn handed her a folded paper. The handwriting was fine and slanted, the ink slightly smudged. "I sent to the circuit judge through the postmistress," he said. "Told her what happened. He's agreed to witness a common law record when he rides through next week." Olivia stared at the letter, then looked up. "You want to make this official?" "I want to give it a name." "Yours, mine, his." He nodded toward Peter. "So nothing's ever uncertain." She swallowed. "You sure?" "I've never been more." They married under the cottonwoods behind the cabin, with the judge standing solemn beside the fence post. Olivia wore the same blue skirt she'd crossed the river in. It hung looser now, the fabric faded at the seams. Quinn wore a clean shirt he hadn't touched since autumn. Peter fussed in Olivia's arms until Quinn took him, then quieted against his chest. The judge said the words slow and plain. They said yes, each looking only at the other. There was no ring, only Quinn's quiet promise and her hand in his. That night, after Peter had gone down, she stepped to the porch where Quinn stood watching the trees. The wind stirred low through the grass, the air warm and still. "I didn't think I could be happy like this," she said. He turned to her. "But you are," she nodded. "I am." He reached for her, pulling her close. She rested her head against his shoulder, and they stood that way, the hush of the woods around them, the home they'd made behind them, and the boy they both loved asleep inside. Quinn kissed her, then not hurried, not uncertain, just a quiet, steady promise. She kissed him back, arms around his waist, heart full, and from that night forward they were a family, not by chance but by choice. Years passed, the cabin grew fuller. A second cradle joined the first. Olivia tended the garden through spring and summer, taught Peter and his sister to read by firelight in the winters, her voice low and steady like the wind through the trees. Quinn built more shelves, added a second room, carved Peter a toy rifle just like the one that leaned behind the door. They worked side by side through hardship and harvest, through storms and sun. They did not speak of the past more than was needed. They lived in the day they had, and the next, and every night, once the children were down, they sat together on the porch, hand in hand, saying little. They didn't need to, they had found what they'd never thought to ask for, and they held it close. Always.